What links buildings, bridges, busy roads and the whizzy things that go on them? Well, all of them have been designed by someone, but what goes on inside a designer's head? What are their thought processes to come up with striking images? How do they arrive at their final product? And why am I in a Star Trek uniform? All good questions, of course they are. I came up with them, and I just so happened to have found such a designer. And as this channel is about flags, this designer has their own colouring in of a city flag officially adopted, so it's probably the best qualified to answer such questions.
So with me, I've got Eric Hart. And before I explain why I've got Eric Hart in detail, it's probably best that I ask Eric why he's here, what he's been doing, and the link with flags. Eric, how are you?
I'm very, very, very good. I'm so happy to be here to talk to you today. Yeah.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you very much. So first of all, flags. I mean, that's what we're here for. Tell me just a tiny little bit of your involvement with flags.
Sure. So I am an 8th generation Syracusan, Syracuse, New York. Had a design competition to redesign their poorly designed city flag that they had, I guess they had that since 1915 or 1916. And I just so happened to have won that redesign competition with this flag behind me called the First Light flag.
Excellent. Brilliant. Well, congratulations, first of all, because looking at the finalists, that was a tough competition at the end there. There were some brilliant designs. I must admit, when I was watching Michael Green's Flags for Good video, when he was reviewing the last 4, and he was right in saying that, yeah, whichever flag is chosen, it's the right choice. But yes, so congratulations to come out on tops, because that must have been a tough one.
Thank you.
Tell me, what were your thoughts about the other 3 finalists, actually?
Sure. What I ended up really liking about those other 3 was that they did sort of choose a focus for their designs. And so, and their focuses on, that they had chosen were very much Syracuse centric sort of things. And one of them was centered around snow. Syracuse gets a lot of snow. And one was centered on salt. And Syracuse had a very influential, booming salt industry in the late 1800s. And the other one was more focused on nature and had a more visually discerning link to the Haudenosaunee people of the sort of Onondaga land that Syracuse is on. And so and mine ended up being sort of more geographic in its upon first look, and more natural upon its first look, but that we all chose very specific things that were very Syracuse centric, but also very different from one another. I really, really like that. And something I found interesting was that we all kind of landed on basically the same color palette for all of the flags. And that was not something that we had ever discussed. I had never spoken to any of them before they were chosen. And when we did all meet up via Zoom and we spoke to one another, we were like, everyone, why did we all land on the same palette? It's because it's Syracuse. We all distilled Syracuse in a very similar way. And I think that they all did a really great job, and I commend them for their time and energy that they poured into them. And I know that during the voting process, there was many, many, many Syracusans that voted for their flags. And I definitely want them to come out of this feeling that they really accomplished something great with what they put forward.
Yeah. No, they all 4 of you, yeah, you're right, had some really good striking. And as you say, independent from each other, but it's still, there was almost that family there of linking them together, which you're right. Now you've mentioned that brings it closer together, which is intriguing. But so tell us a little bit about First Light then, and what sits behind that, and what this represents.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll just kind of scoot to the side here, and I think maybe we can point and direct this way. But First Light is a flag that represents Syracuse in a way that I think off the bat I would describe it as sort of geographic. And so Syracuse is actually sort of it sits within an area of land that has these very beautiful rolling hills. And so part of that is there is a place within there called the Valley. That's where I was born and raised. And so you have the Valley, which I would say is here, and you have the not mountains, but like hills that would roll up to the either the west or the east side of the valley here, and you have the sun coming up over, sharing its light upon the valley and the rolling hills of Syracuse, sort of all in one. And so I would say it starts there with that, and that's how it's representing Syracuse right off the bat. But the 6 points of the star represent the 6 nations of the Haudenosaunee, which is a Native American confederacy. One of the first, or the first, people, I think, in the world. I don't know if it's the world or if it's just North America that started democracy. And so democracy coming from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, them living on the land, us unfortunately taking the land from them. And so everything that we have within Syracuse, I wanted to make sure that I was paying respect to that group of people. And so you have 6 nations, 6 points of the star. And so also Syracuse had 6 prior names before Syracuse. And so I wanted to pay homage to those past 6 names by also having 6 points of this star as well.
That's clever, because
right off the bat, those are the easy things to talk about.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Because I must admit, I mean, the star, apart from being orange and therefore really striking in the center there, you don't often find a 6-pointed star. So that's interesting. Usually the 5 is what the US flag. I know Utah, the new flag of Utah, went with a 5, but I think originally it was a 6 or 8-pointed star before they changed it to 5 to what they've got. So yes, that's really. However, Chicago, if I remember rightly, is that 6 points?
That is a 6-pointed star. You got it. Yep.
Right.
And there's a handful of others as well, in terms of city flags in the United States that have 6-pointed stars. And so in terms of my research and what I was reading as I was sort of starting to design things, and I was things were condensing into my usage of maybe it's going to be a star, how many points of that star is it going to be? It did seem from my research that 5-pointed stars tend to be used more for state flags or like the country itself. The stars within the canton there of 50 stars are representing the 50 states. You have within state flags, you have the 5-pointed stars on the state flags. And so from what I read from the research was that you can use, or you should use, something that's slightly different from that for municipal flags. So I look at something like Chicago is brought up a lot because that has a 6-pointed star, as does this. And so the 6-pointed star really seemed to work very well for this one, just in terms of like the symbology with the Haudenosaunee and the
it's perfect. Yeah. No, I love it. And just run me through the color schemes then that you've got there, especially when you were saying that the other designs had come up with similar, so there's obviously a lot of symbology there then.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Syracuse, I'll just kind of start off with this, is Syracuse has Syracuse University, and a very long time ago, 1860s or so, they had a very old color palette for the university. I believe it was sort of like a lime green and a pink, like a rose pink kind of thing. And they decided, since all of the people in their, like all of the students and the faculty hated that color scheme, they wanted a new one. And so they ended up looking upon one of many things being the New York flag, or the idea of the Dutch coming in and founding New York as New Amsterdam, and the Prince of Orange and that sort of thing. And so orange kind of was one of the reasons why they chose that, among other reasons. And blue came into that as well. So you have this orange and blue, and you see white kind of sneak in every now and then. And so right off the bat, when Syracusans see these 3 colors here, they go, oh, that's a university flag, or that must be a part of the university, or the university paid people money to make that flag because it has those 3 colors on it. But it's absolutely not the case whatsoever that happened. And so in my eyes, this orange, the orange that was sort of adopted by the university and propagated henceforth, I like to say that orange has ripened along with the city as the city was growing from that point forward until today. I like to say that it has broken the bonds of history in that regard. It's broken the bonds of the university. It is this language that Syracusans speak, this orange. Orange is its frequency that we all vibrate on. Orange is Syracuse now. And so it has nothing to do with the university. I like to get that out of the way first. So with that said, this orange, it being the sun basically, or a star or a guiding light, giving its warmth to the city, allowing us to look towards something to guide us out of the problems that the city has. It seemed like I wanted a warm, passionate color for that star, for that emblem. And so also Syracuse having certain problems in its city's history, I thought orange representing restoration, regeneration was quite important. I needed a color to kind of convey that. It's also, so these are sort of like symbology for the city itself, but in terms of orange as symbolic for the people, it's also a very passionate color. It's a courageous color. It's a color for creativity, and these are all things that represent the people as well. And so as I'm going through these four colors, it's kind of divided into two, symbology for the city and symbology for the people. So orange is a good one to kind of start off with, since that's the main feature of the flag. I think I'll move into the white because they kind of work together in a special way there. So Syracuse was known for evaporating basically salt water. It would evaporate the water, and we would be having this salt remaining, and then we would ship that out through the Erie Canal to basically, I think we were the biggest supplier of salt for quite a while in the United States. And so this sun evaporating the water to make white salt. And so it's this connection here. And it's also known that Syracuse is a very cold and wintry city with lots of snow. And so let's look toward the sun to warm us through our white winters. And so you have this sort of dance between why that's orange and why that's white, and why they touch each other like that. So of course, salt and snow for the city, but it's also a peace, and it's also a purity for the people. Again, sort of harkening back to the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and their connection to the land. Very prominent idea is peace and coexistence within that group of nations. And so I thought it was important to make sure that I communicate that. And I would like to think that all Syracusans are very peaceful, welcoming folks. And, another act of, think another way you could kind of work purity into that is that Syracuse had a very booming kind of stone and quarry industry, and we would dig up white Onondagan limestone, and we would sell that and use that as well. And so this white can kind of work its way through there too, in terms of a sort of a historical perspective. So I think white and orange, very important that they touch one another because they're sort of linked in the symbology like that. Let's see, why don't we do this azure blue, because this is also a very important color here. So this is for the city representative of a lake that's very, very important to the city, called Onondaga Lake. Onondaga is the county that we live in. It's the land. It's the one of the nations of the Haudenosaunee. It's actually the capital nation of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy of the six. They are the capital. They call themselves the central fire of the Confederacy. And so Onondaga Lake to them is very, very venerated, sacred lake. And I wanted to make sure that for that reason, and for the reason that it's important to industry and such, that Onondaga Lake be represented here. And as I mentioned before, we used to sort of sell and export salt, and a lot of that salt went on down the Erie Canal. And so that Erie Canal ran through downtown Syracuse, east to west, basically throughout the entire state. And so we could export it down through New York City or out through Niagara Falls in that area. And so
Okay.
this is representative of the Erie Canal as well. So that's the city symbology. And for the people symbology, it's very it's a color that represents perseverance and intelligence. We have a pretty large growing tech hub in Syracuse now, and that's sort of a forward-looking symbolism that I liked to have included. And so
Mhm.
I think I'll move on to the final color here, which is navy blue. And so this is sort of symbolic of the rock, the hard earth, the dirt of the land of Onondaga upon which Syracuse resides. So you have the water, the sun, and the land itself. And so it's also a trust. It's a loyalty and industrious symbology there as well. Lots of blue collar workers really built the city up, and so I wanted to have that represented here in terms of the history. And so there's a lot happening.
Yeah. I think that it's fascinating, and I know that I've heard you explain all this before, but each time I'm with you on every step as you explain all of this, thinking it's not just a group of pretty colours and symbols. The everything that sits behind it and is brilliant, and I think that's what makes real true flags. Then when you can sit for however long with that already, just talking about. Which in effect is, I'm not dumbing this down, 3 triangles and a star. I mean, it's, you know what I mean?
Yes.
I think that's, this is where the true vexillologists come into play and go, this is what we're looking for. This is
Sure.
sort of the playground of what a true flag should really represent. And I think going back to the whole Nava piece of making it simple, and again, not dumbing it down, because this is a very effective and straightforward flag, but to be able to have all that's backstory that sits behind it, I think that's exactly what they were trying to perceive with the good flag, bad flag thing. And this ticks every box. It's brilliant. I love it personally as well. And I must admit, I have got one on order that's coming.
Oh, so, great. That's great.
I've got a local one coming through. So I'll get that up on the board at some point. Excellent. Okay, so in that case then, after winning a competition and now having your flag officially adopted, is this your first attempt at a flag in any respect?
Yeah, I've designed basically anything and everything else. This is my first ever flag, and so I find that funny that it's sort of, I'm here experiencing this, and this is the first time I've ever designed a flag. But design as a process allows someone to sort of solve a problem, and no matter sort of what the problem is. And so I was able to take what I've learned over these last 13 years as a professional designer, and then attack this as just any other problem that I would have been working on otherwise. And so if anything, this is a sort of the design process that everyone in the world works on needs a round of applause for this, because design in general needs a round of applause for this. Yeah,
absolutely. So okay, so before we get into the whole 13 years piece then, so what made you attempt to go through this? And well, I suppose being an 8th generation probably plays a big part of it, but I'll let you answer why you decided to go for this competition with flags then.
Yeah, that's a great topic for me. There was a lot going on sort of in my life at the time when I found that Syracuse had this competition starting up. And so I was, for whatever reason or another, very interested in my ancestry at the time. And so I don't know, maybe it's a common thing when you hit in your mid-30s, you just have questions about ancestry. I've seen that a lot as I was kind of going through it. And so I hit this age and found all of these old photographs in my parents' house that I was going through and scanning them, and just learning deeply about my family. And so that was happening on one side. On the other side, my wife and I are discussing sort of, if we're going to have children, where would we want to have them? Would we want to raise children in New York City? Would we want to raise them in Japan? Would we want to raise them in Syracuse? And sort of that thing was kind of happening on the other side. And because of all of these things, I was looking more intently back at Syracuse, back at home. And so sort of just browsing Instagram one night in bed, I see that there's this flag competition that's creeping up, and this chain reaction just kind of went off like, oh, like now is my time to do this.
Brilliant.
Just because of everything sort of aligned perfectly. And so I remember just kind of sketching on my phone with my finger. And I remember telling myself, if I wake up in the morning and I look at these sketches and, it stirs something within me still, if I'm feeling powerfully about this, then I'll continue this project. And if I wake up and I look at them and I go, I don't really feel it, I'll just kind of let it go. And I remember waking up in the morning excited to even look at the sketches, and then seeing the sketches and going, yeah, I'm gonna definitely try this. But if I'm gonna try it, I'm going to give it everything I have. And that was sort of the beginning point for this.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So that a lot of the heritage, your personal heritage, then played a big part to start it. I think that's brilliant. I mean, who can argue with that?
It did, yeah.
With that. So
yeah.
So with that then, and obviously utilizing your 13 years of history, how do you even go about coming up with the ideas? What's the creative thought process that goes in? Because somebody who wasn't very good at art, wasn't terribly great at design at all, what ignites and what starts you off?
Sure. Yeah. I guess first I'll just hit on the difference between art and design. I see when I'm speaking to the media, sometimes they call me an artist, sometimes they call me a designer. I personally find myself as a designer, not an artist. And the way that I differentiate them is that design is art that solves a problem for someone or for a user or something you could say. Whereas art, although a message may want to be conveyed, or there might be a goal for that art doesn't necessarily solve a problem. You could use design as very open-ended field. If you have a squeaky leg on your table, you would use design to solve that problem. We need something to fix this leg. Whereas if you had a squeaky leg on the table, you couldn't artistically change anything to fix that problem,
Make it worse.
So,
but it'll look good.
yeah, you could make it worse. Yeah. So that's where I kind of draw the distinction. And so I feel as a designer, I can jump on a challenge like this quite easily within just the using and utilizing the skills of and the process of design. And so design has a very clear process. Identify a problem, come up with solutions, make sure that the solutions work against the problem. And if they don't, go back to the drawing board, repeat. You can test, you can, reach out to your audience or your user base and get feedback, and then re-implement things and change it again and make sure and butt it back up against the goals that you had and to make sure that you're solving the problem. And so within that scope of what design allows me, it was very simple for me to just kind of start on this. And so the problem being, the Syracuse flag was, for all intents and purposes, ugly and didn't really communicate anything about what the city was in terms of its relationship to the people. So the old flag had the city seal just slapped into the center with blue bars at the top and the bottom. And that automatically made it a problem to ever be able to see that flag outside of very official sort of circumstances. You might see it draped behind the mayor, you might see it in the mayor's office, you might see it at City Hall, you might see it at a state of the city address or something like that, but you can't purchase one, you can't fly it, you can't sell it, you can't buy it. And so sort of all of that is wrapped up into the problem. And so what could the solution be? And I know that it needs to be something that represents the people. I knew that it needs to be something that represents the land, hopefully the history and the future. So I'm thinking in my head, okay, I have the problem, I have my goal and what I want. Who's the audience? The audience is going to be Syracusans, obviously, but sort of from all walks of life. I want anybody in Syracuse that's lived there, that plans to live there, that doesn't live there anymore, but was raised there. Maybe 4 generations of a person who's outside of the city, but their great 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 grandparents were raised there. Anyone who has a connection to Syracuse is the audience, and so I know that those people are the sort of those are the people whose hearts I have to hit with this thing.
That's quite a responsibility, isn't it?
It is. It's scary sometimes, but I think as you go through as a designer on any project, every project, you have these scary moments, and you do learn to stick to the process. And if you stick to the process and you make decisions based on the process that you've set up for yourself, you know, you can see yourself to the end of that process and be happy with the results. Whether or not you win or you lose, the process was able to guide you through in a successful way. Yeah, and so I knew everything I need. I had everything I needed to start. And I usually start a design process by sketching and writing. I write a lot. I know that there's designers who do not do that. I like to type and I like to write as well as sketch. And so I would start there and sort of go from there. Yeah.
Goodness. So what are some of the things then that you have designed in the past other than the flag? What other things have you turned your hands to?
Sure. Yeah. Let me think through my history of. Yeah. So I'll start with my college career then, because that sort of opened my eyes to everything. Yeah, I went to a community college, and it was very much like, you know, this is how you're going to use Photoshop, and this is how you're going to use such and such software. And so it was very much a technical sort of thing. And so, I mean, of course, everyone needs to learn a tool to get a thing done. But once I started at Syracuse University, that's when it was a sort of throw you in the ocean and hope that you learn how to swim kind of thing. And it was very much a learning how to solve problems as opposed to this is how you use a piece of software. And that's all design is solving problems. It could be anything. And so when I say it can be anything, I'll start to get into the things that I've designed. So I've designed as solutions to problems, packaging designs, websites, mobile applications, landing pages for companies, banner advertisements, sort of like, what would I call it? It's more of like 3-dimensional environmental type designs I've done. Everything, like anything for corporate businesses, like business cards and brochures and letterheads. And then that went forward, and when I got into Japan, it was much more product design focused. So anything that you'd be downloading from like the App Store or, you know, the Android store to your phone, lots of that kind of stuff, which gets into more user interface and user experience design. Sort of all of these things are very different from one another.
Yeah, but I say so. The process then is, in its rawest, is pretty much the same as you say. If you're trying to come up with a solution to a problem, I mean, it's I guess that's the blueprint that works for anything that has a problem that you need to solve.
Absolutely. It's slightly different depending on what your solution needs to be in the end. So like if I'm approaching a problem that is, you know, the users for this mobile application are having difficulty logging their calories for the day in order for this algorithm to send them back advice on how they can like further hit their calorie goals or their health goals. Obviously, that solving that problem is very niche and very direct and focused sort of set of things that needs to happen for that.
Yeah.
But I would kind of attack it and start it at least with that same sort of set of design principles and go forward with that. It starts to change a little bit as you're going through it, but I think the broad strokes are about the same.
Goodness. So what was the most difficult thing that you've had to design then?
Yeah, no one's ever asked me that before, so I do have to kind of think about that. Difficult. Yeah, difficult has a lot of different
meanings, I bet.
Meanings in terms of design, and so probably the most difficult in terms of like getting sign off from so many different people to get something passed through to get it launched and out the door. That was probably I would say I was doing the marketing screens for a very popular streaming app for HBO, and one of the things that I was doing there was to actually set it so if you were going to go to the app store, you would type in HBO, and then they would pop up the marketing screens to kind of see what you're going to get into when you download this app. And so I just remember that process, although it was challenging, it was a very worthwhile project for me to be on, and I learned a lot on that project. But just the amount of people and stakeholders that project needed to go through was absolutely staggering.
I bet.
And from a difficulty standpoint, that was one of the most difficult. And I would say maybe from a difficult standpoint, as in judging success on a design that I've put out into the world, it was probably any of the work I did for, I sort of alluded to it with the example in a Tokyo company I was working for. They were making an application for people to log their dietary habits, and there was an algorithm that would give them feedback and say, hey, you're eating too much of this, or you're not exercising enough, so you're not hitting your goals for this kind of thing. And so there was this pressure there because people's lives and their health was sort of like in my hands in a weird, strange way. And so I wanted to make sure that I did things correctly, but not just correctly, but also humanely, in a way that would imbue trust in the product and imbue trust in us and as the team. So there was a lot riding on it, and being able to judge whether or not that was successful for people, that was difficult, So I would say depending on the project, you get different sorts of difficulties, but those two were two that definitely stand out.
So there's got to be, I suppose, almost a link between practicality versus what's the word I'm looking for? Something that's aesthetically looking nice. Because I'm sure you could probably come up with things that this meets the requirement. This does everything that needs to be, but it looks dull as shit.
Yes.
So I assume then there's got to be a synergy between the practicality and actually the aesthetics behind it.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yeah. And so I'll quote one of my design professors from Syracuse University here. You have to seduce the eye and then address the intelligence. So it's 2 in 1, and you need to balance the two out, because you can do one and you'll pull everybody in, and then they'll go, this is not what I wanted, and this is badly designed, and I'm just going to bail. Or it can look really, really bad, but do exactly what you need it to do, and no one's going to see it because it just kind of floats on by and never seduces the eye. And so there is absolutely this balance that you have to strike. And usually finding that balance is one of the things in the design process that takes a very long time. because there's an infinite number of variables that go into that. And so is it a color variable? Is it a typographic variable? Is it a spacing variable? Is it a contrast variable? Is it a leading? And it's endless. And so finding it and making decisions on that balance is very key, but it's also one of the most difficult things to do.
Imagine. Well, I can't imagine, because that's otherwise I'm in the wrong job. That's, you know, I've not really thought about it. I mean, because as you say, and as I alluded to right at the top of the videos, that everything needs to be designed, whether it's buildings, bridges,
Yes.
cars, roads, TVs, whatever. Everything needs.
Yes.
And you're right. And by goodness, I'm sure if we take buildings then as a prime example, there are some shockingly dull buildings, but they suit the need of the population.
Absolutely.
It's a power block, and it's, you know, but oh my goodness, but there are some beautiful buildings out there.
Absolutely.
And so what I suppose it's, where does the inspiration come? I suppose it's got to be very unique to each specific project, of where you draw inspiration to come up with these things, just to give it that edge. Because I tell you one thing then, that I picked up on a previous interview you did, it was with the flag, with the colours, and when you there's a slightly different version when you pull back, as I call it, where you've got colours overlapping each other.
Yes.
Just explain where you get the inspiration of that, because I found that quite fascinating.
Sure, yeah. And so in this case, the challenge that I was facing there, and this was a design challenge, is that you have this flag here behind me, and the points end here in the center. And from a flag design standpoint, that's fine. But once I start to try to sort of remix this design, or expand upon this design, or market this design, or use this sort of these colors and the shapes for branding, what happens if I need to, you know, extend the bottom of this flag? What happens to where these two triangles meet? It could be a straight line, which fine, it gets the job done, but is it aesthetically pleasing? Does it sort of, is there any other considerations there that could potentially push this into something that's more unique and interesting? And, you know, you could wrap it this way, or you could wrap it this way. You might not even do anything here. You just might let it stay there and then paint a different color under it. I mean, there's many different ways to do that. And so I was struggling with that problem, and I needed to solve it. And I'm looking around the room and I'm sketching, and I see clothing over here in my room here in Yokohama at the time. And I notice overlapping fabric in a kimono. And I'm going, that's very interesting. That could be something I could use. And so I'm looking at this and I'm going, let me think through this. I know that in wearing a kimono, there is a certain way that they drape. And so when they drape a certain way, it's used for daily use. I believe it's right over left, which is why you would see usually one of the colors is, it's right over left always. And so that's daily use. And the other side is when the left is over the right, is when usually in like Japanese culture, if somebody passes away and their body needs to be wrapped for the funeral, they will wrap the left side over the right, sort of indicating that is only for them. And so I liked that idea of wrapping. I liked that it was in front of me. I liked that it came from my environment. And I was happy to give it more time to think through, you know. It's a very small little Easter egg. No one else is ever going to look at it and say, look, he's wrapped to the right side over the left, and so that's kosher. Like, no one's going to think about that ever. But I had to do it, and I wanted to do it, and I'm happy that I was able to get it, to give the thought process to that problem. And so I think that's again one of the differences between design and art, is you could have done whatever you wanted there, but design lets you solve that problem in a way that offers a more, not just aesthetic pleasing, but what would I call that? There's more life to it. There's more chance for thought behind what you're doing that could affect and ripple effect through other things, as opposed to just it being like, oh, that looks pretty.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
I was happy that I was able to do that.
You see, it's little things like that, as you say, the little Easter egg, which I'm a stickler for, and so when I heard you explain that on the Flag for Content piece, I thought that was such a, as you say, 99.9% of the people who would ever see that wouldn't even give it a second thought and just go, that looks good.
Right.
And probably not even acknowledge it, to be fair. But
Right.
it's those tiny details, and I think, and that's the bit that fascinates me, is that as you say, the flag in itself, it all comes to a point at the bottom of the flag itself.
Right.
But to sit there, and I know you did this before the competition was even concluded, so you'd thought all of this way before. To come up with all the potential sort of fallout of it being the official flag, I think to have that already in the bag, so it's just if it's one, there you are, the whole thing's ready. Off you go.
Yes.
So I assume then that's how you do it. I assume with every project that you've been on, you're thinking right down to the nth degree, to the minute detail, I'm guessing.
Yes, absolutely. So I mean, I approach this project like any others that I would ever worked on, which is, do it until you can't do it anymore. Do it, think about it like no one else will ever think about it. Think about every single problem that could come up about it and have a way to get around it. Don't find out all the corners that you would have backed yourself into, so that you know not to back yourself into those corners, and sort of, you need this 1 million foot view of the whole project. I do, at least, so that I can see exactly where things are going and where they're headed right from the beginning. And so, I mean, I have my sketches here. Like, the beginning was this. I don't think that that's going to show up well with my background there. Sorry about that. But, the beginning was just this.
Oh my goodness.
From these sketches, it develops into a thing that I can really rally behind. And then once I get there, I go, it's time to go nuts. I can really flush this thing out. And I mean, I didn't want to give the judges any other chance. To be honest, I didn't. I just said, I got to a point and I was like, I think this is the one. And I had been at that point 3 or 4 times prior. I think this is the one, and it wasn't. And then it happened again, and it wasn't. And then finally, when I arrived here, I said, okay, I've made up my decision. It checks all of the boxes that I have. It solves all the problems that I've had. All the feedback that I was getting from my friends and family changed from "that's boring" and "that doesn't reflect me," and it now is sounding like, oh, wow, that's great. That does reflect me, and that is energetic, and that is interesting to look at. And I think that that's something that we could rally behind. And so when all of that came together, it's like, okay, I need a website, because I'm not going to send this to the judges in like a PDF or something. I want a URL to just throw in an email and just be like, click this. And then they click it, and then it's like, wow, look at all of this stuff. That's what I want. And then that's what I knew I was headed there. Once I got to a certain point, I said, okay, I need to do a website. I've done websites before. I've designed websites before, so that's not a thing that scared me or anything. So I was ready to do that, and I was actually excited to do that. And I think that that's kind of like really, when I got to the website sort of zone of this project, that's kind of when sort of all of the floodgates let loose, I think, for me.
Oh, and then start venturing down different avenues, you mean? And because
in terms of okay, so now I have this tool that I can tell the story with now, finally. And so, okay, I need to get a flag printed, of course. I know that the chances of this winning is fairly low, but if I want to tell this story, I want video. And I can't make video unless I have a real flag. And I want a real flag because I'm actually really happy with the job that I've done. So whether I win or lose, I actually want a copy of an actual flag to keep for myself. But now that I have this website, And now that I have a flag, I can make, videos of it waving in the sky. Great. And then I can put that as, part of the homepage, like that folks land on. I can put it behind a logo. Oh, I need a logo. Let's make a logo. And now I have a logo, and now I have a video, and now I have a website. And it's like, oh, I need to do this, and I need to do that, and I need to do this, and I need to do that. And if I have this, I need to do that. And I was so into it, it just did not stop. And so it was like, okay, I need all of these mock-ups, because it's very important as a designer, especially when you're in this phase. This is very sort of interesting phase, and a very important phase of a project, is when you're trying to get buy-in from people. And when you're working at some place, like I said, I worked at HBO, or this Tokyo company, you get buy-in from a very small amount of people. In the grand scheme of things, it's a very small amount of people. Whereas opposed to a flag, you need to really get a large amount of people to see it, but also agree with it and feel it in a way that they would, be excited to be a part of it. And so one of the ways you do that in any design is to show it as it would be in reality. And so it starts with, let's Photoshop your flag onto flagpoles in Syracuse. And that's kind of the natural place to start. And then it's like, okay, I could do a video of it waving and superimpose it elsewhere. Sorry, you wanted to have a question?
That's my doorbell. Give me, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No worries.
Sorry, that was
no worries at all. No worries at all. Yeah. So it was sort of the time when I knew that I needed to make all these mock-ups, and started with flags in Syracuse, in City Hall or outside of City Hall, and famous parks and whatnot. But
it almost seems obvious that that's a route that you've got to go down to show everybody this is what it looks like.
Okay, so if I've got this right, when it comes to the finished design, am I right in saying that you had the design as it is, but many different themes before you actually chose the final version?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and I didn't really even know exactly what themes it was going to be. I'll just hear, as it was kind of difficult to show the sketches on video because of my background, unfortunately, but I look at the sketches here that I had now, and I just started with, I wrote down the words basic shapes, and then I was really just kind of jotting down general flag type shapes, common shapes that you would see in flags, starting with cantons and tricolors and that sort of thing, stars, shields.
Okay.
Yeah, circles, triangles, that kind of thing. And so once I kind of got that out of the system, and that was mostly down on paper, I would transfer that stuff into a digital file, a digital design file, and that would allow me a lot more flexibility to start moving shapes around quickly, and giving different colors quickly, and just organically things kind of moved in a way that, like, the themes just sort of naturally presented themselves in a strange way. And so I believe the first theme that I landed on was this theme of crossroads, because Syracuse is actually in the center of New York State. And the famous thing about Syracuse, outside of its university and its salt production, was that it at one time had the highway going through it, the Erie Canal going through it, and the locomotives coming through it. And so it was this real crossroad. And so that idea sort of lent itself to certain shapes and certain ideas and certain colors in my head that were coming up. And so I would run down that theme until it was just bone dry, and I could not go any further with Crossroads. And so it was like, I need a fresh start. I'm going to pivot 100% into something completely different. So I would look back at the sketches and go, oh, okay, there's something here. I see, these jagged sort of hill-like structures here. So I'm going to kind of like play on that. And then I would play on that for a while, and then it would sort of sometimes go off the rails before I would come back to that sort of geographic theme. I would call it the hill theme, maybe. And so, yeah, the shapes would be hill-like, and then it would kind of go off, and I would be just kind of going crazy and then come back, and then I would go crazy again, and then I would come back. And I remember coming to this one, and I was thinking, okay, I'm done. This is it. And it was, if you could zoom out of what this flag was from a shape perspective, if you could kind of pull out and you would get the other side of this hill and the other side of that hill, it was kind of starting there. And there might have been a shape or a bar or something above it. Maybe this wasn't quite the color that was used here. Maybe there was another point or not another point here, but it was kind of in the ballpark. And so I said, okay, how now I'm sort of on this level that feels good. Geography feels good because buildings go away, people go away, names go away. What doesn't leave a city is its geography. The hills stay. I'm an 8th generation Syracuse, and those hills are the same hills the 8th generation, family member all the way back saw. And hopefully they're going to be the same hills that 8th generations ahead of me see. And that sun isn't going to change. I mean, not for millions of years, but that sun's going to be the same sun that anybody is going to see. That's the snow, although we've got some interesting weather patterns coming through now due to climate change, but like that, it's still known for snow. And and even in the future, if it is not known for snow anymore, it was at one time known for snow, and it was at one time known for salt. These things can't be taken away. They can't be given away. They can't be removed. They're not going to die. So this is a track that I think is going to be a long lasting kind of thing. And so how do I make this even more simple? And so now I was on a track of geographic, but simplicity. How do I make this more simple? And to really dumb it down, I just zoomed in. I mean, it sounds quite simple, but to just do that was not simple. But I zoomed in, and then I get to a certain point. I think it was one or the other colors, and it was the same color, whether or not it was the dark blue or this azure blue. And I remember feeling, there's not enough symbolism. I need one more piece. And I don't like the uniformity between the two. It was too symmetrical down the center. I need something to make it a little bit more unique and something to offset, this from a visual standpoint, because it's attached here at the hoist to the pole, visually is heavy. Right. And so, well, maybe I could go with a darker color on the fly to balance out the heaviness from a visual standpoint. And so I went that route, and it allowed me to rope in another color that could represent the water, because I was missing the water part of it. And so throughout that entire process, this was the 270th flag that I produced, and it was the last one that it works. And so that was not something that surprised me, that it was going to take that long or that it was going to be that many. I knew, and I was prepared for that, just because in my experience, that is what design is. That's the process. It's create and burn 270 times until you get the thing that solves the problem correctly. And so it was a lot, but I'm very pleased with it.
Oh, absolutely. And you should be. But am I right then with how you've just described that? Does that mean that the sun was potentially one of the last elements to go into the flag? Or the star, sorry.
From what I remember, I was tinkering with the idea of stars earlier on.
Right.
And they were in 5-pointed variations and 8-pointed variations and different colored variations. Sometimes they weren't in the center. Sometimes they were off to one or the other sides. And then I got away from it for a while. I sort of was down a different path, and it was circular for a while, where it was more of I'm in Japan. It was more of a rising sun in that regard, because I was pulling some of my inspiration for this flag from Japan as well. It's a place that has given me a lot, and I love it. And so that's one of those tiny little Easter eggs just for me and for you now and for your viewers now, is that you have the white here and then the rising sun. And so tiny little thing, but that's not symbolism that I've really baked in. That's just a wink and a nod for me, in my experience. But it was a circle for a while.
Right.
And I would get away from it, and I would come back to it, and I would say, this is working in a different way. You know, it was a sun, but it didn't quite. The symbolism was slightly different. It wasn't rising up over anything. It was just a sun. And once the geography made its way in, and once that symbolism started to work, it wasn't just a sun anymore. It's a sun rising up over the hills in the valley of Onondaga. And that's what I needed. That was that little bit that gave it life.
Again, it's yes, all this that sits behind it. I mean, for somebody who doesn't design, to sit and listen to how all the intricate, tiny, tiny little things that come into it. I almost now want to zoom out really and see what it was that you were looking at to start off with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it fascinates me. Then, yeah, that's interesting that you must have had such.
I do want to share those.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, it'd be interesting. Just I don't know. It's probably from a flag perspective. It'd be because yeah, we look at so many flags, so many symbols, and I can't think of a particular flag that's I've ever read the description of or talked about where you think, well, hang on a minute, what is just over there or down there on this flag? Because it's
Yeah.
it's not there.
Yeah.
There's nothing about that. This is the first
Yeah.
time I've ever come across anything where you know the descriptions and the details are yeah, you're just seeing this bit. There is more to it if you come back a little bit more, which I
Yeah.
think is superb.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's
When I
great.
see this flag, I mean, this is East Seneca Turnpike and this is West Seneca Turnpike. And for me, when I see this flag, that's what I think of. And it's a very Syracusan way of looking at these hills and saying, oh, I know that road and I know that road. And I know that if that's East Seneca Turnpike or West Seneca Turnpike, if it's east, that's going to be the town of Onondaga. You can't see it, but it's off here. And this is going to be the town of Lafayette, just up at the top of that hill. Like, I know exactly this down here is going to be the Onondaga Reservation. Can't see it, just cropped in a little bit. If you just pull out, if you zoom out, it's going to be there.
That's brilliant. I absolutely love it. I think it's a remarkable design. As I said, I think its simplicity is, from a visual perspective, is breathtaking. To then understand the whole nuances, and they are really nuances that sit behind it, I think just gives it so much more life. And I think Syracuse is very lucky to have such a marvelous flag, and you've done them wonders. Obviously, I'm sure the other 7 generations would be proud of what you've been able to deliver as well. It's fantastic.
Thank you. I feel this other 7 generations, you know, on the shoulders. I do.
Oh, rightly so.
It's a heavy feeling. It's not all joy. It's a heavy and sort of not a
Yeah.
burden, but a sort of a deep honor. Yeah, it's an honor. Yeah.
Brilliant. And so I've just got one final other question, which is very important, of course.
Sure.
So with all the influences and the backgrounds and the way you design stuff and the way you tackle it and you know the challenges that you have, what is your favorite TV show?
Yeah, that's a good one, especially in how it how it works its way into my design process. I have a good one, and and I'm gonna tell you why. Um, it's because it was playing in the background quite a lot while I was working on this.
Even better.
So whether or not it's my favorite, it's up there. But it was certainly playing in my aura as I was creating this flag, and it is Star Trek: The Next Generation.
You are my new best friend.
Not, resemblances notwithstanding. But I had that on, yeah, a lot of the time. I mean, and I was working on this project from, the birthing of this flag from probably August to December or so. And it was on probably most of that time, just from season 1 all the way through. So
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, in that case, then we'll probably leave it there because you and I could probably spend the rest of the day now just talking about that.
Yes.
But it's been fabulous talking to you. It's been a brilliant insight for me, and I hope for anybody who's been watching. Because as I say, it just opening that little bit of a Pandora's box of what really goes on inside a designer's his head has been brilliant. A real eye opener. So thank you for sharing what goes on, and say not just about the flag, but the whole process. It's you must be very good at solving all sorts of problems and crimes. Let's go for it anyway. So yes,
it does extend to other things like crimes. You're right.
I'm sure it does, and no doubt it should do. As the way that you come at it is probably more of a Sherlock Holmes way to my Watson. I'm guessing is
there it is.
It's how we see it. So yeah, no, thank you ever so much for spending the time. It's been an absolute blast. And so just remind us then that the flag is already official. It's I know it's all been signed off, but I can never. I mean, like the Utah one was almost gave it a year before the flag became official. But is it? It's there. It's done. It's up. Is it running?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I was most surprised about from this whole procedure, and that I have to thank the organization Adapt CNY and the Syracuse Flag Committees, which Adapt CNY set up, for getting this through so very quickly. And so, I mean, for them, those two organizations, they had been dealing with this for about 4 years or so. But from my perspective of submitting and going through the adoption process, it is done, and it is a done deal, and it's 100% adopted. And it took less than a year to go from taking in design, variations to being 100% adopted, and for use by anyone and everyone. And so it's all done. Very happy with that. It's officially adopted, new city flag of Syracuse, New York, and it happened very, 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 very fast.
Excellent. Oh, that's fantastic. So, what's next on the project box then?
Yeah. So I'm freelancing at the moment, and I'm kind of like open and looking for what is kind of coming next. But this is going to stay with me, I hope, for my entire life. And so I'm really working on how best to start to get First Light into sort of woven into the fabric of Syracuse culture and Syracuse life. So I have a store set up now where folks can get the flag inside the U.S. and other accoutrement, basically anything, mugs, pennants, bags, hats, t-shirts, and that sort of thing. And I know that that's going to go a little way into getting this into people's lives and whatnot. And I can stretch my design skill in making those products and selling those products to people. But on top of that, I do want to work with other organizations within Syracuse to get the flag out, and maybe into parks and murals, and
Sports teams.
I wrote a credo. Sports teams, exactly. Yes, I wrote a credo to go along with the flag, and so that I wanted to at some point get maybe a plaque that we can install somewhere so that people can read the credo and look at the flag at the same time and sort of feel the connection between the words and the visual. And so that kind of stuff is happening. And also, I am actually right now trying to get Eric Hart Design into an actual business itself. Right now, I have usually just been using that moniker for doing some little freelance stuff here and there, but I would actually like to start to get that into a more of an official, official spot. And so using Eric Hart Design to actually more officially take on new projects and stuff. So that's on my docket, and that's a very interesting learning experience for me to start to become an entrepreneur and have my own business. So
yeah, it's not a bad portfolio, is all I can say.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Right. Okay, we'll wrap it there. Thanks again ever so much for spending the time with us. And so yeah, all the best then with your future endeavors, and especially with pushing First Light within Syracuse as well, and getting it above and beyond what it already is.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they'll take it. Chicago ran with it and have got it pretty much on every corner, on the police shirts as well, haven't they, and everything. So I can't see why
Absolutely.
Syracuse can't do exactly the same thing as well. So so good luck with that. Good luck with your ventures as well, and stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Will do. No doubt.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Excellent.
much for having me. This is wonderful. Couldn't be any more honored to be speaking to folks within the vexillological community who want to give support to the flag and appreciate the flag. It's really is an honor. Thank you so much for your time.
Brilliant. No problem. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you again to the wonderful Eric Hart for being so passionate about his flag and the process. Links to him and his sites are below. To check out more City Flag episodes, go to the playlist here. And if you'll excuse me, I must dash. Enterprise, one to beam up. I've always wanted to do this.